All right. Welcome to our Boring Nerds Nerdcast. I have with me my co-host Paul. I'm Elena Perfileva, and our guest today is Jamie Langskov. Jamie is a senior director of community at Unusual Ventures. And Jamie, I'll let you talk a little bit about yourself in a second. I've known Jamie for some time from SAP Community, and Community will be our subject for today. And we're very excited to talk Jamie about this. So Jamie, please go ahead.
Thanks, Elena. I have been super excited to be on the podcast. Really excited for this topic today as well. Obviously, this is near and dear to my heart. A little bit about me. I have been working with business communities. I won't say enterprise entirely because as I've gone through my career over the last 10 years, I have gone from the SAP community, which is about 3 million users, and a massive corporation, to MongoDB, which was 0 to 10,000 in the first year in terms of users, and about 2,000 employees, all the way down to 200 employees and just getting off the ground communities. So I've done the full spectrum of sizes and worked primarily with developer communities and product-focused communities. So really thrilled to join you both today.
Awesome. We're glad to hear you and to have you with us. So our first topic that I would like to talk about, of course, all of us, Paul, myself, and you, Jamie, we all have this SAP community in common. So I just want to start with reflecting maybe back on its history. I think SAP Community, or SCN or SDN, as it was known before that, it's a place where I first met Paul, where I first heard his name, and when I also first met Jamie. And I think it was really great place for some time until kind of suddenly it wasn't. So what do you think really kind of transpired there with SAP Community? What's your view on its history?
Oh man, we're getting right into like National Enquirer stuff right away. Like, guys, go deep on the dirt.
Pull no punches. Let's go. Let's just start.
That's what we do.
Yelena goes straight to the heart of the issue.
I'll start by saying I was not there in the SDN days, but when I moved over into the community team officially from product support, we were towards the end of the SCN days. And I think there was a lot of really positive things about the platform when we were in SCN that I think we can agree we're missing as we moved into the new version of the community. A lot of things obviously changed internally during that time in terms of strategy around who the community was going to be in the future. And, we had a lot of, for the folks out there, for some context, so a lot of what I was working on when I was on the community team at SAP was focused on blogs as well as overall user experience. And I think during that time, the SAP organization was also broadly trying to figure out who they were going to be going into the future. And so there was a lot of desire to make this singular experience, which I think still persists there today across all of SAP's products. But the SAP ecosystem is massive. And to make that happen in a time when a lot of people are changing jobs within tech every few years, and especially you look at, product teams and leadership, executive leadership, and there were many reorgs that happened during my time at SAP as well. And so I think all of these things combined into a situation where you had a group of folks who, a lot of them had been there for a long time on the community side. And so they were building towards what they felt was the best vision going forward, but it was really hard, I think, to make progress within that spinning, changing ecosystem that was happening. And so I think if I were to simplify it, it would be that the community did not see a lot of the things that that the members all felt were obvious and important to have in the experience. And the community team was saying, yeah, we know it's important, we're going to make it happen. But then within the broader environment was really hard to actually get executed on. And so I think there was this best intentions problem, right? We made a move. We said, okay, this is where we want to go. We're all on the same page that we want a better experience. Oh, crap. How do we get there? And so I think that the company, I think, is still actually trying to figure out how to do that and get to the right place.
Jamie, that was wonderfully diplomatically spoken.
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
I have a lot of love for the team over there, and I know that the struggle is real.
Yeah.
I will say there's things that are obvious that are missing, and I think one thing that is important to for all of the community members to hear is that no matter the leadership that group has been moved under, the incentive for them has stayed the same, which is we want this to be better. We want to work through this and make this better, and figuring out how to take in all of the feedback from the community and translate it into tangible execution for better features, better functionality, better navigation, all the things. That's the challenge that persists there. And sometimes things go well and sometimes they don't. And, they're good people though. And they do want the best for the community for sure.
Lena, can I grab the bull by the horns just for 1 second here on this topic? Because Jamie, I poked around on some of your bios in various places and stuff like that. I found some juicy money quotes, right? And and there's one of them I found that kind of dovetails with what we're talking about here. And so I wanted to get your perspective on it. And the quote is, and these are your words, these are not my words, these are your words. I believe the best companies of the future will be community led. So my question to you is, what does it mean for a company to be community led?
I was thinking about this morning, actually, coming into this conversation, and I thought, okay, if I were in charge of SAP, if I were CEO, what would I change? What would be the big things that I would change? So first I'll answer your question, then I'm going to dig a little bit deeper back and bring it back to your latest question. So
tie it together for us.
Awesome.
Contextualize.
Okay, so to be community led means that not only do every single leader and every single IC in the company understand the value of the community to the company, but decisions are actively made centering the community at every level. So whether you are building your product roadmap, whether you are building your support experience, community is not an afterthought. And that has to also be reflected within the org structure of the company, where the community does not report to marketing. It doesn't report to product. It doesn't report to customer success. Community needs to have its own vertical into the board where it says, okay, we have all these stakeholders within the company, but we tell you what your users want, and we manage the relationship with your users on a broad scale, and we manage your brand appearance. We should have a say at every level. And I think that's missing for a lot of companies, where they don't understand that community is not secondary. It is the core of your operation. Everything you need to know about your users, everything you need to know about the market, everything that the market should know about you should be visible in your community.
Yep. Yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah.
So to reminisce slightly more about SAP Community, and I'm wondering if, Jamie, you might see it in other communities as well, or they might be just a little bit too young for that. From my side, I've definitely seen a huge role that I would call them community elders played in making sure that community stays healthy and also that it is supported within SAP, because I couldn't just help but notice that eventual demise of SAP Community kind of started with key figures there, such as Marilyn Pratt or Mark Finnern, leaving Community, leaving SAP later. So do you think, are those key roles, are those elders or leaders of community, what is their role? Are they truly vital to the success of communities?
The short answer is yes. And it's a great question because I agree with you that I think that I'm going to be less diplomatic now. I'm going to say that I think that
yes.
what the community is struggling with is a lack of identity. And the identity has to be there for every persona in your community, including your elders. And I love that term. It's the same one I used at Mongo for our power users, but the ones who had been around forever. They understand the technology. They answer more questions than they ask. They've seen all of the things, right? They know the history, and you can't buy or teach that. That's a thing that comes with time and commitment and investment on their part into your community. So you have to be able to provide value for those people. And when we talk about the identity of a community, what I'm talking about is, what is the purpose of your community? What role does it serve? And what role do each of those people within your community serve? So going back to your question, Paul, this is all related.
Like it's a web. Let's just draw us in. Yeah,
it is. So being community led means, okay, we want to build a better iteration of our product. I will say right now, I asked in an internal meeting once to our CTO at the time. I won't say who it was, but I said, okay, look, we have the benefit of being the best of bad options right now in the market in terms of user experience in our product, in terms of ease of implementation, all the things. What are we going to do to continue to stay not only viable, but competitive going forward? And the answer to that question is, we have to activate the community. We have to get the community more closely tied into product development, period. And that's where those elders play a very deep role. Is you activate elders by giving them buy-in into your product as it develops, so that they can say, I helped build this. It's amazing. I've seen the internal inner workings. It's not perfect, but let me tell you where we're headed. And that's so much more powerful coming from a community member, especially one who's well respected, who has been around, who has shown that they're there for the good of the community and not just themselves. That's so powerful. And that doesn't happen when it comes from somebody who works in the company.
Yeah, I agree definitely. And one of the major roles, I think, that was played by those community elders or leaders, however we call them, was they also brought new people to the community. There was, yes. I remember in times of when Marilyn Pratt was there, and of course there is no other Marilyn, there is no one compares to her, but I have not seen anyone really stepping into similar role so far, because she was kind of the heart of the community, and she identified people who were potentially interested, who were interesting themselves and who were passionate about community and being involved. And she made sure that they would be brought in, they would be given voice and platform, etc. And I'm kind of observing SAP Community mostly passively in the recent years. And what I'm seeing, it's great that there are still SAP mentors, and that's a whole different story. There are SAP Community champions, but I've known those champions for years. I barely see any new names. I barely even see any new names altogether on SAP Community. So when all those SAP champions, no matter how great all those people are, I have tremendous respect for them. But when they eventually retire, what you gonna do? I mean, there isn't new flow of any professionals. And what I'm seeing in the younger generations, they don't really particularly care. They care to consume some content. Yeah, they're nice blogs, but I yet hear of any person being excited to contribute to SAP Community. So it's just very sad to me.
Yeah, and I think that's another strategic component that really needs to be carefully considered when you build out your strategy, especially at a life cycle stage like the SAP Community is currently. I mean, it's been around for a long time and gone through, like you said, multiple iterations. So how do we continue to make new developers, new technologists interested? And I mean, because SAP, when you decide to work with SAP technology, it's a commitment. You know, there are particular skills and language that you have to learn to work within the SAP ecosystem. So what in exchange the community needs to do is say, okay, you have dedicated time and energy into getting trained and you're interested. How are we going to cultivate that? And how do we think about then the member life cycle? We talk a lot in community about lurkers versus active engagement. And it's a spectrum, and it's not that somebody is forever a lurker. You should be looking at them and saying, okay, they came in, they consumed. All right, now what? How do we nurture them? And this is where some of the marketing mentality comes in of how do we nurture that person, not to buy the product, but to buy into the community, because it's a value exchange. How do we get them to now give back some value into the rest of the community? We have given them value by giving them access to all these experts, by giving them access to courses, or, you know, however you want to build your community and offer what you think will attract people. But now you have to encourage them to turn around and say, okay, how do I incentivize them to get more involved? What does the next stage look like? And how do I get them to take that leap?
Jamie, this whole I'm so glad we got you on this. This whole conversation is just like it's a volcano eruption in my mind about this stuff. And because I'm thinking about like, and I don't know how else to say this except for some, I don't know, we probably should keep our podcast mostly safe for work, but like I gotta drop one thing in there is like the community can be like the way you're describing it and the way I'm reflecting on it too now is like for the marketing team, CMOs and all that kind of stuff down below, like community is your anchor so you don't float off into like the outer space of bullshit, right?
Yes.
Like the community tells you what's really going on, and like, man, you can really tell when somebody's like wandering off into the weeds of like, oh, you haven't talked to a customer in ages, or you haven't talked to a community. Like, what are you even smoking? Like getting there, and community, man, it's a real problem. What's the like? You talked about community life cycle. What is the life cycle of a community for in the product space? And this was not in our notes, Yelena. I'm sorry. I'm just curious.
That's okay.
No, please go explore.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have actually been working on a blog series on the Unusual blog recently that's really targeted towards very early stage founders. But community starts with your early build partners, or what we call design partners, where you have an idea, you need to validate that idea. So you start small and you grab 5 to 10 people who you think are your target user, and you start building with them and getting feedback. We're familiar with this on the user research side. As you grow, though, you need to be mindful of who you're attracting into your space and what the value exchange is. So, all right, we still want feedback, but now we're going to use the community to also maybe provide product support, and we're going to use it to start developing brand recognition amongst, let's say, the broader developer world. Okay, well, that looks a little bit different. Now we're looking at things like growth metrics and new member acquisition, but also how long do people stay and do they come back and things like that. And then as you go forward, so I think the SAP community, I think, Elena, you would probably say peaked around 2008.
Yeah, I think so. There was sorry, slightly side conversation there. There was a cycle of SAP Community. There was a period of renaissance around 2012 when it migrated to the new platform because it opened blogging for a lot of new people. But after that, it kind of
just trying to get brownie points with me.
Yeah,
that's when I owned blogging.
but I felt that wave
nice.
that wave kind of went down around second migrations. Yeah, please continue.
So I think that eventually you hit the point where growth isn't so much of an issue because you're big enough, your brand is big enough, people know you. If they're interested, they're going to find you. You have enough SEO collateral to, be top of mind when somebody searches for something relevant. So then you start looking into the things that we're talking about. How do we cultivate those deeper relationships? And I think that we get to a point that SAP is probably at right now where it's going to have to do some tearing down and starting over. And I'm not talking about platform and infrastructure so much as mentality and mindset and the value attribution that we put on community. So going back to what I was saying before, what would I do if I was CEO? I think that the biggest thing that SAP could do to push forward and become community-led or more community-led is, one, pull community out of the whatever hierarchy it's in right now. I think last I heard it was on the HR learning side of the house, which is a whole nother thing. But I mean, frankly, community has been through customer success, marketing, now HR. It's been everywhere. And it's because fundamentally the company they know it's valuable, but they don't know what to do with that. And that, I think, is the stage that we're in now, where we see, okay, we have 3 million users. What are we doing with them other than giving them Q&A space and fighting off marketing blogs?
No.
And I think that they've lost sight of the people. When you get to that size, it's really easy to get bogged down in the scale and lose sight of what is the actual value of those relationships and how are we cultivating them. And I loved your point, Elena, about not seeing new people coming into those mentors and the champions programs, because those are critical. Those programs are critical in helping people to move through the different ranks of community member. And, topic leader was a huge deal on SEN. People bragged about that. They take it back to their employers, and that was a big deal. How do we recapture that in a way that's meaningful, that isn't just dinners and, private sessions with executives that are probably mostly bullshit anyway? I mean, frankly, how deep can you really go in a hour long session with an exec, when really what you need is a group maybe in each product area that's tied to that are power users of that product, and they are regularly meeting with the product team, with the executive leadership. They're providing feedback, and the product team comes to them and says, here's what we're thinking. How does that resonate with you? Let me show you some mock-ups. Let me show you where we're going with this. Instead of, here's what we built, high five, no?
Yeah. It's funny that the word marketing have already sounded quite a few times through this conversation. I think it is a major kind of component of communities. It can be a little bit controversial topic because none of the community members want to participate in marketing. But I think realistically, it's one of the greatest values for the company, that you get unbiased external opinion, and you get it for free, most importantly. That's why it always has been really weird to me that at some point, as you mentioned, SAP kind of passed around that community team in different divisions or departments, whatever. At one point, it was essentially given to marketing to feast on. And I think that's where it really started to go downhill, because you cannot simply unleash your marketing on your community without very dire consequences. They definitely can work both together, but community cannot be driven by marketing. It should really be the other way around. And I think it's also one of the issues with SAP in general, not just when it comes to community, but in greater when it comes to the influence in general from different channels. They just don't want to hear bad things about them. That's how I feel. At least I have been told very explicitly several times, like, you need to be more positive, you need to kind of tone it down a notch. Mentors have been told, you're not supposed to give us feedback that you want to give us. You're supposed to give us feedback that we want to hear, essentially. And that's just not really great corporate mindset. I'm sure there are some phones ringing in Waldorf right now. Someone maybe is getting fired. I don't know. But I think that's the gist of it, and that's really been a problem. Paul, what do you think? I see you have your deep thinking.
Well, actually,
expression.
so this is part of this discussion is really interesting to me, because I'm holding up two fingers here because I want to remember the other thing. So the mentor side, I just became an SAP mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And it was thank you. And I think it had been, in talking to some other folks that I knew still around there, it had been a while since there had been kind of action on creating more of those. And I will say, Jamie, and I think this probably reflects the relative recency of this, is that from my side as a new one, I'm starting to see those conversations come back or come around more. The not just like because I just was at Zephyr and I did some of those hour-long exec ones, but like my calendar is full of the other ones now too, right? So like I think there is some positive movement toward that, so that's good. It'll take me a little while to kind of get sunk in, so I can't tell you for sure, but like at least my calendar suggests that I'm that there's a lot more to it, right? So I'll give them like 2 months of that or whatever. But the other thing I wanted to pick your brain about was, because I've been a part of a few startups here and there. In your work at Unusual, for the startups that you advise and you work with on Community, where does Community roll up in their organizations, and how do they structure that on their side?
That's a good question. So typically I'm working with teams that are just founders. Mm-hmm. They don't really have an org yet, or if they're slightly bigger, often it will roll up into marketing anyway, just because they don't have the capacity to deal with it. Okay. That doesn't mean that I don't advise them otherwise. I think everybody should have a chief community officer, personally. Mm-hmm.
And they should pay them really well, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Right? Hey, community people are in demand right now. It's been really wonderful to see, honestly. I will say that professionally, that would be the one positive outcome of the pandemic so far, has been moving to remote work has forced companies to think about how they actually engage with their customers, and realize that big conferences isn't always it. You can pay a ton of money and have a booth, but what is that actually getting you?
I see tons of relations, evangelists, community, all this kind of stuff. Like it used to be that recruiters would reach out because of an acronym in my LinkedIn, but now they reach out because somewhere in the dark past I have evangelist in one of my titles back when, and now I get reach outs for that. And I never expected to get any reach outs for that, right? But it's like, just like you said, it's kind of alive today in that sense. Yeah.
And I think going back to what you were saying, Yelena, about marketing, this is something that I have noticed, and it kind of shocked me over the last couple of years. The more that I talk to people who do tech marketing, enterprise, SaaS marketing, I have heard them actually say the words, "I don't know how to market to developers." And I think this is actually something that the marketing industry, the marketing profession is going through right now, where they're having to learn, oh, I'm not selling to executives and like managers anymore. And now I have to actually figure out how to make developers like this product in a way that doesn't turn them off and make them want to slam the door in my face. And I've not seen many organizations yet that do that well.
What I've heard, what is an interesting expression recently, that developer relations are essentially marketing from developers to developers. And I know that SAP Community way back started as SAP Development Network. It was originally called SDN, and it was definitely heavily dominated by developer community. I have never really felt marketed to in those days. It went much more heavy into overall marketing at later point, but now there is also official developer, I think, advocates group at SAP. And when I look at that group, and it has really well respected in community, very long-standing community members, such Thomas Young, Rich Hellman, and many others, many new faces there versus community outside. But I kind of feel exactly that way when talking about this new group, the way it's structured and the way it communicates, because I feel before that we were all together in the same community, and Thomas and Rich and TJ, they have posted before very great blogs, really great content, but these days I kind of feel that they are kind of by themselves. And even when I was talking to Paul, I jokingly called them not advocates, but attorney generals of developers, because I feel more like they're working for SAP, and I understand that they are physically working for SAP, but I do not perceive them as my advocates as a developer, like, a typical, person in need of advocate would feel. So what do you think about like development relationship in the communities in general?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to the things we've been talking about identity and personas. If we think about what is the purpose of the community, if we're talking to developers, there are developers at different levels of expertise. So how are we providing what they need? And at the beginner level, are we providing the content, the learning, all those things that they need? And as you progress, are we providing the opportunities that more advanced developers are looking for? And I think what I see when I look both inside the company and externally at the experience is the typical problem of we have an external experience that reflects how disjointed the organization is. And if you had really thought end to end, okay, I'm new to this ecosystem. What does this look like? I'm going to be invited into the community and I'm going to be shown the areas that make the most sense to me. I'm also going to be recommended content to help me learn and onboard and become more advanced. And maybe I'll be part of a cohort and, we'll learn together and I'll get more network connections that way. And maybe there's job postings that are relevant to me. So I should have those brought in as well. There's no element of unifying experience that exists in the developer ecosystem for SAP. And that, I think, is their biggest missed opportunity, is they should be looking at how does this one individual person interact with our community? How do they interact with our developer relations folks who, in my opinion, dev advocates are celebrities. In many companies, they're the face, they're the voice, they're the personality, and they're the ones that can say, I'm going to teach you this really super random but fun thing that will help you learn our technology. I'm technical enough that I can have that conversation with you, but also I'm fun and I'm personable and I can get out there and, not just do talks, but meet with people and answer questions and things like that. When I think about community, and this is something that I learned from someone at MongoDB actually, is community is developer relations at scale. So community then takes what the developer advocates are doing and makes it accessible and useful and valuable for everyone else. And we facilitate the conversations around that content and around those dev advocates. So the dev advocates as individuals can't talk to 3 million members. It's not feasible. But what they can do is give the company a human face that also speaks in their language at their level. And then the community gives them a place to then connect with other people that are similar to them who have also experienced that content and have those conversations and develop their own networks. And I think the synergy of bringing all of that together is what's really lacking, frankly, for the developer experience at SAP.
Yeah, kind of especially that last part. I think it's important to not to be wrapped up too much in the developer, advocacy and pushing, here is our new product, here is what you can do with it. But when there is nothing else, when there is no kind of circling back to the community and to other people working with it, it's like, yeah, it's great that there are those great, SAP developer advocates, but where are other people at? Where are other regular people? And I know they are there. I see them commenting on Twitter more frequently than on SAP Community for some reason. Would be nice to have them in the community as well.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point. An advocate is supposed to be a two-way advocate, not just for the company, but for the developers back into the company. And so, Paul, going back to your comment or your question before about being community-led, what is the mechanism for that? I don't think it exists today within SAP. I think that a lot of companies struggle with that. They say, like you were saying, Elena, we don't want negative feedback. We want you to tell us this is great and then go out and tell your friends this is great. And really I hate to say it this way, but the way that they've gotten away with that for so long is just by being SAP or being the industry leader. And I think that at some point, competition is going to catch up. Somebody more agile, who is more customer focused, who is more community focused, is going to be able to take advantage of that. And, I hope that they are able to figure that out before then.
Yeah, and we have definitely seen it doing research that we do for newsletter and for the podcast, for our daily jobs sometimes. Before that, if let's say 5 years ago, you would think, well, SAP is a leader, and thinking someone seriously creating competition for SAP in ERP space, it would be kind of, funny, haha, but really laughable idea. But now you look at the world outside of SAP, and its competition is not really even like Oracle and Microsoft, but there are other companies that are really, that they're digging into SAP's sphere quite a bit. I think Acumatica was the one that we've written about. And if you look at them, their customer relationships and their development and community relationships is really what sets them apart from companies like SAP who have grown, too big to fail. At least that's what they think. And I'm curious if you have heard anything further on that SAP Influence website. It was in the news recently because there was some security issue and they had to take it down for a while. I think it's still maybe not up just yet, but even before that, I always felt that it was kind of a more of a checkbox for SAP to check, like here we're listening, because it was just so poorly structured. At the same time, to me, this free and voluntary feedback from the customers, that's what very mostly valuable for the company. Yet SAP has not given their Influence website the attention that it was due. Do you see other companies making the same mistakes, or maybe learning from mistakes of others?
No, I think that a lot of what SAP is struggling with across the board of all the things we've talked about is pretty standard for a lot of companies right now. They're still trying to figure out, and that's why this community-led concept is so important and novel, because if you're going to stand up a feedback mechanism, you need a lot of things to go right. One is you have to have not only your executives on board across the entire company, but you have to get them to get buy-in from their teams. And the outcome of that is that you have two-way conversations, not just bringing in feedback, but also giving transparency and responsiveness and saying, okay, yes, we're going to do this. No, we're not. Maybe this might be, we're considering it. If it is going to happen, it's not going to happen anytime soon. Some sort of communication back to the community where you are saying not only, yes, we hear you, thanks for your feedback, but also here are the things that we've implemented that have come from the community over the past year.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm putting together for the last segment of that blog series I mentioned is I think that if you're going to be community led, your product roadmap should reflect that. So you should be showing, 75% of new feature development should be happening based upon either inspiration or direct input from your community.
Yep.
That's not a stretch. If your users are out there telling you this is what's priority for us, don't go build your pet feature, build the thing that they're asking for, because that's what got you here. And if you're not continuing, again, with the life cycle, you have to check back in. You can't just say, we made it, we're done, the community's great, we have a ton of users and visitors, and this is fine. Why? Why are you continuing to throw that value down the drain instead of capturing that knowledge, capturing that input, and facilitating those relationships?
And it's funny that even when some results were achieved through that SAP Influence website, I've been part of some of those projects for some time, and there were great enhancements, some features that customers really wanted, but SAP just never told anyone. And I even explicitly suggested to the project manager, I said, look, people really want to know this stuff, because I know I've been on Community for a long time. I've seen those questions asked, and you have delivered those changes. They will be really helpful. So go and post on SAP Community. And she never did that. So, and all of that information, it lives within SAP Influence website. So if you're not part of that influence, you didn't even know what's being delivered. That's just purely mind-blowing to me. Not even caring to, shout it from the rooftops, hey, this is what we have done. This is just weird.
Yeah.
Elena, sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that's the whole point is if they don't understand the value of the community-led relationships, and they don't understand that somebody who is bought into you as an individual, they feel loyalty to you, they're going to take you to their next company. In the end, it ends up being more revenue and more growth for the company, but that's not the point. The point is you delivered on a thing they asked for. Yes, you should be shouting that to the rooftops, earn the brownie points, take the win. You have to build that up. And yeah, it's definitely a missed opportunity. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
No, thank you for Yelena, you flagged a topic here about women in communities and influencers. Yeah. I would love to stand back and watch you guys talk about that for a little bit, please.
Yeah, I think it deserves its own, podcast episode probably.
Okay.
But yeah, for full disclosure, Jamie and I, we have been kind of following each other on Twitter for quite some time, since we met through SAP Community. And I have been back channeling with Jamie. She's been my kind of confidant on some of the lady issues on social media. When you see
tech lady issues,
when you get some feedback from someone who that's really kind of puzzling or just troublesome sometimes, you're trying to figure out like what the heck, what's going on, how do I react to this or that, or do I react, do I not react? But I think that existence of this lady issues on social media itself, I think, is probably one of the biggest problems. Why we feel different and why we are treated different. It's I think we will share probably this link with our readers. I found one very interesting research about women influencers in general. And I've heard many times people speak about women influencers as if it's also on them to create more women influencers. And what I found just completely very profound analysis in that research is that cannot be on women to bring in more women, because women influencers as it is, they already face a lot. They already have a lot of their plate. So you cannot put more stuff on their plate without giving them more support and just expect them to magically, create more women in IT or in influence, etc. And I have been asked several times to maybe guide or lead younger women if they want to become influencers. And that is kind of one of my main concerns, that I'm not sure I really want anyone to be in that place. I don't think that I consciously can suggest to anyone, yeah, go ahead, young woman, go ahead and become an influencer. It's because it's so much fun. It's so great. You will be treated with such respect and dignity. So yeah, Jamie, what are your thoughts on that? I probably have many.
I think you're right. I think this is a whole separate podcast episode. So I'll put it this way. My very first blog post I ever wrote on the SAP community was an activity that I think our employee relations group had asked us to participate in, which was basically introduce yourself, like day in the life, sort of, why I work at SAP, what's awesome about it for me, that sort of thing. And at the time I was a single mom, and I was sharing about the fact that, SAP gave me a lot of flexibility and, allowed me to give my daughter the life that I wanted to give her. And one of the first comments I got on that post was somebody within the SAP ecosystem who said, that's kind of silly. Like, you should really just be at home, because women should be at home, taking care of their children. And I'm going, excuse me, sir, but I mentioned that I am a single mother. So if I stay home, my daughter and I are homeless. That's not feasible. But also, who says that? And this is in a professional environment. And that's just one example of the kind of ridiculous stuff that we deal with, on top of trying to just do our jobs and be good at our jobs. And it's in person, it's online, it's everything. And you never know. You always have to second guess. Am I being rejected, turned down, told no, held back, passed over because I'm a woman or because of my work? And that's all this extra mental load that we have to deal with. And so I tell my children, my parents were very, of course you're going to college, of course you're gonna, do it. My mom wanted me to study business. And, I got my undergrad in political science because I am a raging, bleeding heart liberal. And that was what I was passionate about at, college age. And then the recession hit and I went, oh crap, I guess I should go get a business degree. So I went and got my MBA. But the bottom line is I tell my girls, so I have a 13-year-old stepdaughter, I have my 12-year-old, and then we have a 3-year-old. So we have a house full of girls. And I tell them, do well in school because they can't take your education away from you. But beyond that, I don't care what you do.
Yep.
Do what makes you happy. If you want to go into tech, I will help you. I will support you. You don't have to code. You don't have to do any of the things. There's lots of jobs here and there's lots of money here. But if this isn't what drives you, then if you don't have the skin, the thick skin and the passion to push through the walls that you're going to crash into, don't do it. Go find something else. So my 12-year-old wants to be a writer.
Excellent. Well, we have two. We have full support, full support from us.
Yeah.
All right. So as we are wrapping up, we typically try to end with some maybe action to our listeners and viewers. So I will start with me because it's a surprise question. I know you didn't give you
Whoa.
a chance to be prepared, but it's a simple one. So I just want to ask everyone, like if you were to give an advice, short advice to the potential community leaders or companies who want to establish community, what would be the most important things that you would tell to them? And for myself, I would say, because community is first and foremost people, I think that creating meaningful connections for the people in your community, that's probably one of the most important pieces. Content is going to build itself, but connections between people will not. So Jamie or Paul, what do you think?
Oh, I have so many. If I had to distill them down, I would say that two things. One, metrics drive behaviors. So be careful who you end up reporting to, because whatever metrics are important to them is what you're going to be expected to support.
Nice.
Which is why I push hard against reporting into marketing. I think that it drives the wrong behaviors, but as long as your metrics are aligned with what you know is right for your community, then you'll be okay. The second one is hire the right people, not the skills. You can train the skills, you cannot train the people to be better humans. And if you have somebody who has just an outstanding personality, they are just a pleasure to be around, that person can learn all the other things. Find the right people for your community, everything else will fall into place, and take the time to train them.
Yep. Yeah, excellent. Well,
the back to me cyber stalking you, Jamie. I scrolled back in your Twitter feed a little bit, and you had a great comment out there. I don't even know when it was, but well, it wasn't too long because I didn't scroll back too far. But you said that you yourself are an introvert masquerading as an extrovert, and that is me too, to like a 1,000,000,000% degree, right? And like I think if I was presented with either talking to my younger self or somebody who kind of wanted to be or saw a path to influencing, it would be to say something along the lines of like the love for people and community and empathy and communication is like so much more important than whether you can, code a quick sort off the top of your head and see or whatever. Like that, just like you guys said, that can be trained or whatever. Like you gotta just have that. I feel like you have to have this sort of I'm never sick of like if my job was to do podcasts like this all day long, and then I could just curl up into a ball and like die at night for like 8 hours and then come back, I would totally do it. I love this. I love this kind of thing to 1,000,000%. Like just I love it a ton, even if it drains my battery, right? And if somebody is looking for community or influencing things like that that should be the place where your heart sings the most, I think, is loving the conversation, I guess.
Awesome. All right, so here you go. Great advice from Paul and Jamie and myself. And thank you so much, Paul, and thank you so much, Jamie, for joining us today. And thank you for listening and viewing. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.